Welcome to the Franchise Frontier, the podcast where we explore the evolving franchise landscape, dive into latest industry trends, and share actionable tools and tactics to help you build and grow your business.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Franchise Frontier podcast. Today, I am beyond excited to welcome a guest whose energy and perspective on leadership are nothing short of contagious. Barb Betts is a sought-after speaker, trainer, and coach who has spent years with professionals in the power of building authentic human connections in the business. She's known for her practical approach and incredible enthusiasm. So, Barb, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you for having me, Dave. I am so excited about our conversation today.
Well, that being said, let's get right at it. Let's start a little bit talking about the heart of your work. You've kind of built a career on the importance of human connection. What does true connection mean to you in business beyond just networking?
It's a great question. I always say, when people always ask me, I get asked constantly, where did my passion for relationships and human connection and truly doing what I've done my entire sales career into now my corporate keynote speaking career, like how did all of that evolve? And for a long time, I just would always say my sales career. I would just always say it started because I learned how to effectively use relationships that drove sales. And it wasn't until recently, in a speaking community I belong to, someone asked the question, what's the story that you need to tell that you're not telling? And I sat there and thought for a moment about it and thought really hard about it. And I really realized, you know what, this journey of human connection actually started when I was a kid. When I was a very little girl, I was an only child. So if any of you know what it's like to be an only child, it can be, okay, fellow only child here, Dave, it can be lonely, especially depending on what your parents did. And I have a feeling I might be a little bit older than you, or maybe we're from the same generation, but I also was a latchkey kid. Oh, us Gen Xers that would go home to empty homes. So not only was I an only child, but I was going home by myself every day with two parents, dual income that worked outside of the home. And we were joking about the 405 freeway earlier, who also worked in downtown LA. And I live in Long Beach. And if you're from Southern California, you know what a drive that can be. Oh, I always go back to being a little kid. And not only was I an only child, but I also was awkward. I was weird. I was overweight. I wasn't cute. I wore glasses. I had braces. I had a birthmark all over my face. And so I was the last one to be picked for kickball. I was never invited to the sleepovers. I ate lunch by myself more times than I can count. And then I would go home to an empty house. And so you see where this pattern of truly feeling lonely and disconnected started for me. And so what I always say now is realizing and reflecting back on that journey I had as a little kid. It's kind of like growing up without something. People that you talk to who grew up without food, right? Who are always hungry, will always look at food differently for the rest of their life. People who grew up maybe without a stable home or a stable roof over their head, or constantly were moving, or potentially had to live with family or friends, or God forbid, homeless as a young child, they will always prioritize a shelter differently than you and I might.
Mm-hmm.
And so I go back to that and I realize that's why I prioritize human connection different than anybody else I know, because I know what it's like to go without it.
Yeah, that's powerful. I couldn't agree with you more. As an only child, as a latchkey kid, to be honest with you, I don't know that I've ever thought about it like that until you just said that. I think that it's incredible to look at it in that perspective and also realize that everybody is different in terms of how they form those things, how things get accomplished, right? What kids that haven't had food or whatever that might be, how it forms us for our adulthood and what we end up doing professionally.
Yeah. And I think what I realized was when I would get that connection I was looking for, how much I would cherish it and how much it would change me and transform me. And so I truly started to learn what real human connection looked like. And it also goes into that when we talk about the word that I will make sure is in every presentation I do for the rest of my career, which is authenticity. What does an authentic, a real relationship look like? And the reason I bring that piece into it is because of the being awkward, weird, and not accepted child is I learned how to perform and protect myself and I started performing and being the kid that everyone wanted me to be included, right? So I always say this kind of feeling of inclusion and connection and authenticity and all of that stuff that we learned, good or bad, happened on the playground. Most of how we are conditioned as adults started on the playground.
For sure.
Because we either learned how to be like, if you were like, we were talking about my son earlier, who was an extremely competitive athlete his whole life. So that boy was extremely competitive at kickball, right? And was the always the one wanted picked for every team because he had natural athletic abilities, right? So his pattern of competition started on the playground. My pattern of fitting in and being fake started on the playground. And so then I learned I was building relationships the wrong way. And then there's lots of journeys that happen through life and pivots and turns. And we don't need to talk about my whole personal story here. But I want to just remind everybody that some of the things that you're dealing with in either being able to connect to somebody or not being able to connect to somebody probably started on the playground.
For sure, it's so insightful. To your point, I was found that connection with my coaches, right? Those were my people. And you're right. Like I would force myself to try to be the best to continue to maintain that connection with coaches. And
Yeah.
it helps in what I used to do and what I do now. When you look at leadership, right? Obviously, leadership today looks different than it did 10 years ago. How do you see connection shaping the leaders of tomorrow?
Well, I have a big passion around this topic and this subject. And I think that connection going forward, and it is right now, and it has been in the past, we may just have been not been able to articulate it, is obviously we know every leader needs to have this level of emotional intelligence, right? That's kind of been beat down our head. And I would say the last 5 to 10 years, the big topic's been emotional intelligence, right? And being emotionally aware of yourself and others and understanding and being able to recognize that Dave's not happy because so and so just walked in the room. And every time so and so walks in the room, Dave gets upset. Or every time you talk about X subject, you start to see Dave get uncomfortable, right? We've been taught as leaders that we have to have this emotional intelligence lens to look at everything through. And I do think emotional intelligence is hyper important in 2025. But I believe there's a new game in town. I believe that leaders who actually can connect authentically to their team, authentically to their sales team, to their clients, whoever it may be. That level I'm now calling relational intelligence, right? How do we take these everyday interactions we're having with another human and actually turn it into trust, right? Because leaders can't lead if someone doesn't trust them. Leaders can't sell unless someone trusts them. And so we're so focused on being emotionally aware and maybe being aware of how we talk to people and the way we respond and we interact. And that's all great. But if you don't understand how to turn all of this connection and all of this conversation and meetings and sales calls and everything else that we do as leaders into trust, that's the piece we're missing. Because just being emotionally aware isn't going to make somebody trust us, right? How do we turn that into actual relational intelligence that allows us to build these human relationships? Because it's not just about connection. Connection is what drives a relationship. But how do you actually get to the relationship? And that's where you need that level of relational intelligence.
Yeah, I love that. You know, when I think about that though, as the role of the leader, right? Obviously, many leaders struggle with balancing results and relationships, right? So, what advice would you give them so that they can manifest and keep those relationships at the center while still driving like performance?
Yeah. So I think it comes down to first understanding the three keys you need to have a relationship. And I think this is really key. And this is work that I've actually just started doing as I've written my first book ever. Everyone told me when you sit down to write a book, you become a better thought leader, a better speaker, a better everything because you're really forced to really craft your ideas and get them detailed because it's not just about on a podcast where I can say a sentence to you. It has to be a chapter, right? And how do you expand those words? And so I've really worked on this idea of what are the three keys to an actual relationship. And I think before you can worry about performance, before you can worry about expectations, before you can worry about KPIs, before you can worry about any of that, which is what you're talking about, right? The performance. And people do have to perform. You have to figure out what the three pieces to a relationship are. And I want you to think of them like a triangle because at the end of the day, I don't think any one of them is more weighted than the other, right? And we all know a triangle is three equal sides. So at the floor of that triangle is visibility, right? You have to actually be visible. But when we talk about visibility, we talk about presence. Like you have to be present. Are you actually showing up? not as just the leader, but actually showing up in someone else's lives as a true relationship. The second piece is you have to have vulnerability. You have to have some level of vulnerability with the people that you lead. And that can be as simple as saying, you know what, team, I think this is pretty awful too. I'm struggling with this new change too. I don't like the way the company's going in this direction either. However, we've been handed that piece and we have to act on it, right? I don't like our new CRM either. I'm struggling with it. So instead of pretending that you have it all together, be vulnerable with your team. Now, I'm very clear that there are different levels of vulnerability in a relationship, right? You're going to have a different level of vulnerability with your team members. And oh, by the way, you should, than you do with your best friend or when you're sitting drinking beers at the bar, right? That's a different level of vulnerability. But if you don't let people in to see that you are human just like them, they're not going to perform for you, period. And then the third piece of that triangle is relatability. And relatability, I think, is one of the biggest factors. Is are you truly relating and connecting with your team? Because if you don't have some level of relatability with somebody, you don't have a relationship, period. How many times have you met somebody at a networking event and you have a great conversation, but you have nothing in common? You don't ever follow up with them. You don't ever connect with them. You don't ever add them to your list. They beam themselves into your phone and then you secretly don't save it. Never done that before, right? You have to have a level of relatability. So before you can demand anything from your team, I want you to ask yourself, do you have those three things in place with everyone on your team? Because no one's going to perform for you at a high level until you have those things. And I think once you have those things, what you're going to unlock is something that most leaders don't understand, which is they're going to feel connected to you. They're going to be more likely to hit the numbers. They're going to be more likely to give you their all. They're going to be more likely to work the late hours or do the follow up calls on a Saturday or something that's beyond what you might require of them to get the job done. And they're going to feel bought into the team because they're bought into the leader. But then you have the piece of performance, you have the piece of expectations, and I think that's the piece where we have to go back to some of the traditional holding people accountable. But I warn you, you can't hold people accountable until you have a relationship.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting that you say that because I also think to the fact of there's a way to drive the numbers without driving the numbers, right? There's a way that we can get our kids to do the things we want without talking about that one thing, you know? If the if the task that I want to have done is the bed being made, I don't need to always keep talking about the bed being made. There's another strategy, there's another way to go about that. So, when I talk to you and I've listened to you talk to our network, and as we talk now, you obviously have incredible energy. Like, where does the energy come from? And how do you sustain that energy as a leader when talking about sometimes talking about these KPIs or those type of things as a leader? How do you sustain that energy?
Yeah, I would say, are you bought in? Are you bought in? Are you bought in to the KPIs? Are you bought in to the energy of the company, the messaging, the sales, the outcome? Because the reason I have so much energy, even though frankly, transparently, I slept horribly last night and I skipped my workout this morning. And when my husband woke up, which never happens, and I was still in bed on a weekday next to him, he was like, "Are you sick? Are you okay?" Right? So transparently, I didn't have a lot of energy coming into this today, but I'm completely bought into what we're talking about. I'm super passionate about it. It's my life's work. It's truly what I'm designed to do in life. And so I get fired up. And so I truly believe if you are not energetic about what you're doing, if you are not excited to go to the team meeting to have the conversation, you're not bought in. And that's
Yes.
okay. Maybe you're in the wrong role. Maybe you're in the wrong company. Maybe you're in the wrong industry. Maybe that's a sign that you need a change, which I know is what a lot of people come to this podcast to hear is like they know something more is inside of them. And so, how do you create energy when you don't want there to be there? Sometimes you just got to suck it up. I mean, I could say a lot of other things that would be inappropriate for this podcast, but sometimes you just got to suck it up, right? But I would say at the same time, if you aren't naturally feeling excited and energetic to push your team and drive your team, the first thing I want you to question though is who are you bringing to the table? But if you're bringing your real self and you have those relationships with your team and you're still not feeling it, you're probably in the wrong role or you
There's a
don't believe in the company as much as they want you to.
Yes, there's a lot to be said for going back to the triangle you were talking about. If you're bringing authenticity and you're not just like as they say, don't just talk about it, be about it. If you're really being about it, I think that that's what, to be honest with you, the goal of this podcast is. There are people that are in that world that they don't 100 like they enjoy their job, but they're not 100% bought in. There's something else for them. And hopefully they would come to this podcast and say, I'm not even sure what else there is for me. So let me look at these other avenues, right? Because to your point, to be the best version of yourself and be the best leader, you have to be about it. We used to talk about it in coaching. They would always say that, and I've said this on other podcasts, employee or your team will follow a leader before they'll follow the vision. Meaning, if your leaders are not doing the things to support the vision, it's gonna be it's a chain reaction. Your son knows it, and we know it in sport like you can't even imagine, but it's the same way in business. So, on the flip side of that, what do you see as the biggest mistake leaders make when it comes to connecting with their team?
I think the number one mistake is not having vulnerability. I think that even when I was running my sales team and my brokerage and my prior, career, and I still run it to an aspect today, but not at the level I was before. Being Having humility, admitting you made a mistake, admitting that last week's meeting didn't go so well. Guys, I know I was a little hard on you, but you know what? That was about me. That wasn't about you. I'm sorry. I think that not having vulnerability is the number one mistake leaders make. They think they have to be perfect. They think they have to have it all together. They think they have to be perfect every time. They can't admit they did something wrong. They can't admit that, guys, I don't like the direction we're going in either. Here's all the things I'm doing behind the scenes or with the higher ups or with the SVPs or with whatever type of level you are in your company or just directly with the CEO. Or, hey, me as the CEO, I don't like the direction this company is going. And here's what I'm working on to make it better. I think that the second you show up with humility, the second you show up that I am real, and I am just like you. I may have a different title than you. I may have a different job description than you, but at the end of the day, I am a human just like you, is when the game changes. I actually, back in my day of running my team meetings, used to start every team meeting out with, give me one thing that's going great this week and give me one thing you royally effed up on this week. And it could be in your family life. It could be in your, business life. It could be with a friend. And then I had to go first. And I didn't care. You can't have a perfect week. Everybody had something that went wrong in a week. And what it did was it allowed everybody to realize that no one in this room is perfect. And I think when you do that, you allow for more failing. And you and I both know the way people learn is by failure. The way people get better is by failure. And so if you don't identify that no one's perfect, you can't allow everyone to move forward in the same direction. And I think the leader has to go first.
I think, again, incredible insight. The difficult part is, as a leader, vulnerability is probably the most difficult thing to get across because, to your point, you're supposed to be the leader, right? You're supposed to be, we go back to the medieval times where the leader was on the horse. He was very stoic. No arrow or anything could wound them or something to that extent. But you're right. If you want to build a strong team, it's important to know that every team member knows we've all been there. We're all still there in the same nutshell together. But at the same time, you're working on your things and I'm also working on my things.
Mhm.
And I promise you that for employees, the most difficult thing for an employee is feeling that they weren't heard.
Correct.
And the problem is as leaders, at times, we don't tell our employees the things, like you said, that are going on behind the scenes or that you're trying to do behind the scenes that lets them know that they were heard.
Correct.
So they develop this sort of animosity towards you because they think you didn't even listen when really you did, and you're doing the best you can to navigate that part on the top end.
Yeah, communication is essential. And when I say vulnerability, I want to be clear. If you are a train wreck all the time, then you're probably not supposed to be a leader, right? I'm not suggesting that you advertise that you're a disaster every day of your life. You're supposed to be doing things a little bit better than everybody else, by the way. I just want to add that little footnote in there. But I think you're right. It comes down to communication. Is there updates on, there's a problem going on, the team's frustrated with something? Is there an update going on about what you're doing to move the needle forward in finding the solution, or what is the company working on behind the scenes? If everyone knew as a company, again, this goes back to relationships, if everyone in the company knew what everyone else was doing and working on to get better and stronger, the better everybody will be, right? And the other piece that I would be remiss if I didn't mention about a leader is, and you mentioned it, but it's that overall arching relationship conversation. And do you truly have a relationship with each person on your team? Do you truly know what's going on in their personal life? Do you truly understand where they're having their own personal struggles and the things that they might be carrying with them into the office from the outside, right? It doesn't mean the whole team has to know about them, but do you know about them? Do you know where someone needs grace when they need grace, or empathy where they need empathy? Because when you start treating people as a human and not a salesperson, or a human and not a team member, or a human and not a insert whatever part of the team they're on, that's when you get an incredible commitment, output, retention, excitement, because they're like, wow, Dave really knows me. Dave understands that I told him grandma is ill and I'm having to go to grandma's every afternoon and take care of her for 2 hours. So I'm a little exhausted right now. Dave knows that. And Dave doesn't give me a free pass, but Dave gives me some empathy in that area. So do you truly just understand your people? And that takes, trust me, this is hard work. It takes asking questions. It takes paying attention. It takes caring. It takes having one-on-one conversations with your team. Like all those little aspects I think people miss as a leader. They do this sales meeting, they do the meeting, and then they're like, everyone go off, hit your numbers, see you next week. And they don't take any chance to maybe grab one person aside. Say, hey, you got 5 minutes? I want to catch up for a minute, and take them privately and have a conversation. Like, do you have a schedule? Do you have a rotation? How are you truly building the relationship with your team members? Because if you just are vulnerable, that doesn't work, right? It has to be that two-way street.
Yeah, and I think too, to the people that are listening to this podcast, the incredible value that's coming through right now is when you decide to make the transition, move over and buy a business, start a franchise business, you're going to have to build and develop a team. And your team is what is going to help drive that business. And what makes it so important is these are all things that you want to ask yourself when you decide to get into business ownership. Am I built for that? Can I do this? And also, where am I deficient so I can find these other puzzle pieces that help build out this team correctly that's going to drive my business into where I'm looking for it to go.
Yes. Well
All
said.
right. Well, now let's talk a little bit about you, right? I know I want to get a little personal because I think it's where your impact like really really shines. So dive into your why a little bit. What drives you to do this work and why is it so important to you?
Yeah. So I think that I have a good mentor in my life. His name's Rory Vaden. He is a Hall of Fame keynote speaker. He owns an incredible company, a personal branding and development company. He's best friends with Ed Milet and Lewis Howes and guys like that all of your listeners have probably heard once in their life. And he says, "You're most powerfully positioned to serve the person you once were." And that I say it on many podcasts, I say it on many stages because it really gets to the heart of why I do what I do. What I teach and what I do in my second chapter of my, income life, let's call it, right, is get on stages, on podcasts, in front of webinars, Zooms, trainings, classrooms, boardrooms, and I help people learn how to build an authentic relationship with themselves and with others. And I say themselves first because that is the most important relationship you have. And so, why am I so driven to do this? Is because once I figured that out in life, and I realized how it changed me. Therefore, it changed my sales. It changed my companies. It changed my teams. It's changed my speaking career. I know that if I can impact others to do the same, they'll have those outcomes too in whatever area they're doing life in. And so my passion comes from knowing that ultimately at the end of the day, I know that relationships with others drive sales, drive growth, drive revenue, drive culture, drive burnout, not being burnt out, not burnout, right? It fixes all problems. But what I know is you can't build a real relationship with anyone else till you have one with yourself. And so that relationship is what drives confidence. And we all know what confidence does to people and self esteem and all those other things that have been around in psychology forever. And I unravel it all back to that little girl on the playground and then some things that happened in my young adult life. And then I went right back into performance and protection again, and then had some things happen in my, really just in the last 5 years. And from now, when I've decided to rip all the masks off, stop all the hiding, stop all the pretending, my business has gone from A to double Z. And that's what I want to help others do. So my why comes from who I used to be and what I know I had to do. And then I have a gift of speaking. I have a gift of communication. I have a gift of teaching. I wanted to be a teacher since I was 5 years old. Life went sideways when I was a teenager, so I didn't go to college. So I didn't become a teacher. I always say I'd be principal of the school right now. There's no chance I'd be in speaking. I'd be a principal. I know it, hands down. But life took me a different direction. And so I take all those gifts. When people are like, why are you so passionate about speaking? I'm not passionate about speaking. I'm passionate about the message I deliver, and I happen to be able to do it through speaking. That's what I've realized. But it's taken a lot of years of work to get
Yeah,
there. And I'd love to shorten the curve for everyone else,
you're not so much passionate about speaking, you're passionate about delivering the message.
which is why I could care less if it's a podcast, if it's a webinar, if it's a stage, if it's a,
Yeah.
classroom.
Well, that ties beautifully into authenticity. Like, sometimes you always talk about you've spoken about authenticity being non-negotiable in leadership. Can you share a
Yeah.
personal story with being authentic, how it changed the outcome for you with somebody you worked with?
Yeah, let's first define what authenticity is and isn't. And right, it's the most overused, underexplained word in the world. In fact, it was Merriam-Webster's word of the year in 2023, but no one knows what it means, right? And so one of my passions is changing the perspective on that because people think authenticity is being vulnerable at the highest degree and throwing up your life on somebody. That's called oversharing. Okay, that's not authenticity. And I always say authenticity has to have a lens. You have to have a filter on yourself. Because if I brought my whole entire self to this podcast and told you every single thought in my head or all of my political views, it would be completely inappropriate, right? But it doesn't mean I'm being inauthentic. It just means that's not the appropriate conversation to have with you. We're not at that level yet. And so I believe that authenticity isn't about doing anything. Authenticity isn't about being anything. That's why I hate just be yourself. I hate just be authentic because how do you even be? Be to me makes it performative. And so I believe that authenticity isn't about doing anything. Authenticity is about undoing everything that isn't you. It's about peeling back all of those layers of performance and protection that we've put around ourselves over the years, which we've already identified started on the playground. And how do we start peeling back those things that aren't really us in order to be who we really are meant to be? So that's what authenticity is to
Mhm.
me. And my authenticity journey has happened in numerous different ways. However, most recently, about 5 years ago, and if you follow me on social media or all the channels, you'll know this because you'll see this. You'll get very confused. Dave even said something at the beginning of this podcast, and I'm like, yep, fair question. Why is my hair dark today? So
Hold
I've
on one second, hold on one second. That sounds like a not nice way to say that. I said that your hair looked nice,
You did.
but it
You
looked
did.
different.
It's darker. You did.
To say that I
Yeah.
said, "Why
Okay.
is your hair dark today?"
Okay.
That doesn't give me enough credit.
That is, you, thank you for calling me out. You are 1,000% correct. So, the long short story is I've suffered from female hair loss my entire adult life since I was 18, and it progressed over the years into my 30s when it started getting really, really, really bad. I covered it up for years. We're not doing a hair podcast, so I won't tell you all the ways I did and all the things I tried, but let's just say I spent a lot of money in the hair department. And I went to a hair transplant surgeon about 4 years ago, almost 5 years ago, who read life into me and basically said that I have 3 strikes in the hair department and my hair is not coming back. And I made a courageous decision to explore human hair alternatives, went through a journey with that, and finally made the decision to start wearing human hair wigs 4 years ago. I wear them full time, meaning I have 7 of them. They all have names, they all have personalities, they all are look slightly similar but different. This one happens to be one of the darker ones. I have a very blonde one, which is what my headshot is, which is why this is all confusing. But here's what I want to tell you. I've learned when you hide who you are, you limit who you can become. And I was hiding who I really was, right? I was covering it up. And what I was doing is I wasn't admitting I had a problem. I wasn't, when friends would be like, wow, your hair looks so much better today or thicker today, or what are you doing? I'd be like, oh, it's just growing in. No, it wasn't. I was using a powder on my head, but I wasn't being real about it. I didn't want to tell anybody I had a problem. I was ashamed of it. I was hiding behind it. And so what really made the difference in my life was making the decision actually to come out publicly on social media. And I'm not suggesting that in order to be authentic, you have to come out public on social media about anything. It's just what I chose to do. And I came out public on social media about it and I shared my whole journey. I put a picture up of me almost bald on top of my head and then one with my new hair. And I broke the internet overnight. And what it has done to transform, back then I was still heavy in my real estate sales business. I hadn't transferred over as much to keynote speaking. And all of a sudden, my husband and I's business doubled. And our clients started recognizing and saying things to him. When he would go on an appointment without me, they would say, I just love the way Barb's showing up. And they would say things like, we always trusted you guys, but like, we really trust you now. Like, there's no way someone goes out and talks about themselves like that and is someone that we can't trust. Right. And so I've learned that through vulnerability and authenticity, it's how you create trust because it's how you create human connection. And I think that people just realize that, hey, if I'm willing to do that, I'm certainly not going to blow smoke up their nose about how much their home's worth. Right. And so it has, and it's transformed my speaking career because what do people want in speakers? They want people to show up real and personal and vulnerable and inspire and move and motivate the audience. And you can't do that if you're up there being a robot. It doesn't work. And so, again, I'm not suggesting that anyone have a major hair problem and go out publicly on social media and share their story with the world. What I am suggesting is you all know every single one of you has something you're secretly hiding behind. And it's how do you let one person in on that? How do you let 2 people in on that? How do you just go home and admit to your spouse something you've been hiding? The stories I have heard since I came out about my hair have been unbelievable. I mean, I was getting DMs from women who were like, I binge eat in the middle of the night and my husband has no idea. It's actually why I can't lose weight because I'm up eating at 3 in the morning and he doesn't know. Right? That's a big deal. And just then me going first gives them, or I have a gambling problem. My spouse doesn't know. Like the things that I heard about things and issues and problems people were having that they now felt the courage to just go tell somebody. Now, I'm not suggesting you go tell the world you have a gambling problem, right? But it could be as simple as a leader, it could be again, as simple as having the courage to say, guys, I struggle with this too, right? You think I'm perfect, but I still struggle having this conversation with whoever it may be. And so authenticity and showing up real and human, it's infectious. It truly is infectious and it does create that relatability factor.
Yeah, it's incredibly powerful on a crazy level, right? I think I go back to when I was a childhood, my childhood. My dad is of Asian descent, and so when I first started to decide that I wanted to drink, I would drink one drink and I would get really red. I didn't know what was going on, and it freaked me out. So I was embarrassed about it. I was embarrassed about it. So it's just something that happens, right? People get the Asian flush, but no one knew about it, and I didn't know about it and I probably wasn't supposed to be drinking at the time until my mom finally was like, "Oh yeah, this happens all the time." And then to your point though, like I also have my wife and I in the last year, our little daughter has Williams syndrome and she's had 2 open heart surgeries in the last like 9 months and she's doing fantastic. But you could easily keep it all in. You can easily, whether it be big or small, whatever it is, it's much easier to just be who you are. And then if that means that people are no longer going to be in your circle, then that's fine too. It's okay. And that might be people that have been in your circle for years, and that's all right. People grow out of each other's circle, and that's okay. But to your point about authenticity and doing that kind of stuff, when we said we're going through this with our daughter, like it is what it is. If you say prayers, whatever it might be, but this is what we're doing on a daily basis. It just felt freeing, right? Because you can't do it by yourself.
No. No, I love you sharing both those stories. You're giving others permission to do the same with you, which is where human connection starts. And that's the key to being authentic and vulnerable and real. And you're so right. We're so worried about what people are going to think about us. We're so worried about, will they still be friends with me? Why would you want someone to be friends with you if they don't really like you? Why would you want someone to be friends with you if they can't handle that you have a certain opinion on something or that you have a certain belief in something? If you can't understand that you were never meant to have a relationship with them to begin with. And when you show up as the fake you, when you show up with all the walls up and all the masks on, they're building a relationship with a different version of you.
Yeah, that
And when people, what I say is, and I just kind of, it's interesting. I just kind of worked this content out for my book, is that relationships are a mirror of yourself. And you can't build a relationship with someone else unless you see it in yourself first. And so when you show up authentic and real and vulnerable and human, you see that in other people. You can have that with other people. When you show up walled up, people pleasing, dramatic, negative, right? Everything's negative, then that's what you attract. You attract those types of relationships because they want that in somebody else. You want authenticity and confidence and positivity. And so, what I've learned also through my authenticity journey is my relationships have changed. I do have a different circle. And I have let go of some people that I'm like, you know what? God, I can't stand the way they're acting and being, but I was okay with it before because I was being the same way. And so it really does change who you are and change your circles and change your network and change who you attract. And so in your sales business and in your career and in your team, you want to attract people that have the same positivity and energy and authenticity and confidence as you do. Start showing up that way. And you just might start attracting those people.
absolutely. It definitely narrows your circle for sure.
And that's
And
okay.
it's okay. It's
Yeah.
okay. So and that goes back to what we when we started this part of this conversation, it was about asking your why. And I think that as I talk to many people who are either looking to or have gotten into business ownership, I think a lot of times when we answer that question, we aren't as authentic as we want to be. Right? Because if you're gonna get into business ownership and somebody wants to know what your why is, you better know what it is and you better stand on it. And if that is hate my boss and I can't stand being this and I want to start my own business to prove to that guy that it can be done, that's okay. It doesn't always have to be because I want to set this up for my family. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's like, yeah, I hope that this is successful and it becomes something that I can pass down to my family. But for right now, I want to kick ass in business and that's what I want to do. And that's my why. That's okay as well.
You know what's interesting is when I think back to my why when I started my real estate career, when I started my real estate business, it really had nothing to do with the real estate. It had nothing to do with that I really loved real estate. We had only owned our home for a very short period of time. That is what caused me to go into real estate sales was an awful real estate transaction, but my real why was that I no longer wanted a boss to be able to tell me when I could be at home with my kids. That was my why.
Mhm.
It was because I wanted to be able to be at the 10 AM Halloween parade on a Tuesday. It was also because I mentioned I didn't go to college because of something that happened to me as a teenager, and I put college on the back burner, and in the late '90s, there was no Zoom, there was no online degrees. Everyone always like, "Why didn't you just get an online degree?" I'm like, "It didn't exist."
Exactly.
But I also wanted an authority in something. I wanted to say I'm an expert in something. I wanted to say I have a license in something. And so because I couldn't go back to school and do what I thought I wanted to do my whole life, real estate was checked all the boxes. But to be transparent, I was never really passionate about the houses. I became passionate about it, but I became more passionate about helping humans achieve the American dream, and then teaching and educating and guiding them and being a trusted advisor, which is all very teacher like, right? We see the theme here. But at the end of the day, if someone would have asked me back in my sales career why I did it, I would have played the game of, I really, really care about real estate. That wasn't the truth. And so I think what you just identified of really being honest about your why, and that your why doesn't necessarily have to be connected to what you're doing. It can be connected to the life it gives you, to what it provides for your family, to what it does for you as a human, that it fulfills certain things about yourself. And I think that's why I've transitioned into speaking, because my why wasn't in real estate. And now that my kids are grown and I don't need to be at a 10 a.m. Halloween parade on a Tuesday, right? I can be on the road 200 days a year. That sounds crazy to most people, but I can. My whys are different,
Well,
and that's okay.
the truth of the matter is, if you've even listened to the as this podcast has been through, you've very much established yourself of the principle of your own business, of your own why. You're the principal of you. And that's what you wanted to be the principal, you are the principal,
Yeah.
right? Come into my
I'm the
office if you
principal. Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Welcome to my office. Do you need
Exactly.
attention? No, I'm just
So I also find it interesting, like how this all kind of goes back to connects back to your family. Your, if I'm not mistaken, so I apologize if I am, your daughter is a graduate student for physical therapy. Is that right? Or she's in physical therapy.
You're very, very smart. Yes.
Your son is now a sports agent
Yes.
and your husband is in real
And
estate,
he
right?
runs our real estate business now. Yes.
So all of those things are relationship driven industries. Even as a physical therapist, how do I make my clients feel as if I'm going to take care of them, right?
Yes.
So, how has your family journey kind of shaped your connection on leadership?
It's interesting. I would actually I think the biggest thing that we've done as parents that we didn't realize is, and I've been told this my entire career, that your kids are watching more than they're listening. And, you think it's all about the words you say to them. You think it's all about the stiff conversation you have with them about making their bed. But really, it comes down to, are you making your bed every day? Right? Because they're watching. And if you're not making your bed, how can you expect them to make theirs? And how many parents demand their kids make their bed and they don't? We happen to be parents who make our bed every day. When I think about my journey with my children and how it's changed me as a leader and as a human, it's understanding that I had to model everything I wanted them to be in my actions. And so it made me more accountable to what I was doing. I can't ask them to be positive humans if I'm being negative. I can't ask them to work hard and hustle if I'm sitting on the couch all day in my pajamas, right? I mean, I'm being exaggerative. But when I look back to my specifically, it's funny you mentioned physical therapy as a relationship based business. My daughter, she's in her clinicals right now for grad school. And so she's actually seeing patients. And she comes home every day almost mute because my daughter is not me. She is my husband. She only speaks when spoken to, and she's not going to be the one to drive conversation, although she's learning because she has to your point. But she comes home mute and exhausted because she's had to talk all day, where I can talk all day and still talk all day at night. But my son, when I reflect on his journey more than my daughter's, because she's still establishing herself in her career, she hasn't really started her career yet, but my son has. And what's interesting is, he was a professional baseball player for 8 years and unfortunately was plagued. I call it the minor league injury bug. He was plagued with injuries, and a lot about sports. And once you're plagued with in the minor leagues with injuries, your career is over because there's 15 guys behind you ready to take your spot. And they're all good too. And there's a much longer bench in baseball than there is in any other sport. And so once he identified that it was time to retire because his body hurt and he was tired, and he knew that, yes, I'm going to make the big leagues, but probably another 2 years. I'm going to be almost 30 and I'm going to be there for a year or two. And I'm going to destroy my life and my family in the process. And so he decided to retire and immediately pivot into sports representation. And recently, so in that journey, he took off like wildfire. That's a awful description when you live in Southern California, but everyone knows what it means, right? And he started signing players right and left. And other agencies and other agents are like, what the heck is he doing? What's his secret? Why? He has no experience. He has no
Well,
knowledge.
he's
He
one of
doesn't
them.
know how to do an arbitration. He doesn't know how to negotiate a contract. What he does know how to do is build relationships with people.
He's one of
And
them.
that's what he'd been doing his entire career in minor league baseball is building relationships. And so these guys already knew him, liked him, and trusted him on the field. And being a catcher, obviously one of the most trustworthy people on the field, right? And they loved and adored him and believed in him. And so it was an easy yes. When they're currently unhappy in their representation, it was an easy yes. And so he quickly got World Series champions on his roster, and he represents some big time Dodgers, up and coming Dodgers. And long story short, he just got hired by CAA, which is the biggest agency representation in the world for all kinds of representation. And CAA does not hire 28-year-old kids. They just don't. But they hired him. And I always say to people when they ask why they hired him, like, they hired him because of his relationships. They hired him because they recognize, how is this kid getting appointments with certain players that a 28-year-old shouldn't be able to get appointments with? And he did it by relationship. And I used to say it's just how he's wired. And then he corrected me. And he's like, "No, mom, it's because I've been watching you and dad do it my entire life." And that has now become the closing chapter in my book about how relationships leave this impact and this legacy that you can't even see yet. And I always reflect it back to think about that second grade teacher you had or third grade teacher you had that changed your life, that you still know her name or his name and you still know what they look like, because they poured so much into you and they built such a relationship with you that you've poured that forward. You've believed in people because of that teacher, right? You've built relationships differently. Or in your world, I would say coach. There's a coach you remember from when you were little that changed your life. And I'm sure you still talk about him today. That's what Chris did, was he watched mom and dad do it. And then because of that, he's taken his own personality, which happens to be very charismatic and funny, and he's pushed that forward into the world. And that's what I love about who you are and what you do as a leader, is people are watching you more than you realize, and you are inspiring more lives than you realize. But if you're not aware of it, and if you don't make it a daily practice, and if you don't make it part of who you are as a human, you're not going to have that effect.
Yeah, again, powerful. My 2 daughters that I have right now are 6 and 3, and to your point, they even the 3-year-old watches the 6-year-old watches mom. I
Yes.
stand back with the dogs and try to stay out of the way.
You poor thing.
Well, going back to, you had mentioned kind of being an only child, and this made me think about this based on your family dynamic. When the kids were growing up, were you a sit down dinner family?
We are a
Or
sit-down dinner. We are a sit-down dinner family. We are still a sit-down dinner family. And even if it was Panda Express after baseball practice, we still ate the Panda Express at the table. And what's crazy is, you mentioned this family dynamic and family history, and this is what else I think people don't know about me and I didn't talk about until I was an adult. And everything's fine now, and I love my parents, but I didn't have a great relationship with my parents. I wasn't just a latchkey kid, I was also a latchkey kid who ate dinner in her bedroom by herself, while my parents ate dinner on their TV trays in the living room. You see where I'm tracking, right? I was not close to my parents through young adulthood when I really needed things. And so I have, to the point of how does this shape your future? It's part of the reason I have the relationship with my kids that I have. My son owns a home across the street from me with his fiancée. I mean, for a 28-year-old to wanna live across the street from mom and dad is a big deal. We have such a close family unit because I did everything in my power to not have the relationship I had with my parents. And so it can go either way. They're
yes.
either watching you in a good way, or they're saying, I never want to be like that. I'm gonna break the cycle. I call it breaking the cycle. I broke the cycle. And my mom probably had that relationship with her mother. My dad's father died when he was 16. So there were patterns there that were not their fault. They're not bad people. They only modeled what they knew. I chose to break the cycle. And so by doing that, my kids have a completely different relationship with their parents than I ever had with my parents in my 20s. And then I know that's going to trickle forward. And so, good or bad, they're watching you. Good or bad, they're either saying, I want to model this for my family, or I don't. And so, which are you creating? That's my question.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I think that I don't know why it dawned on me that I would have bet the house that you guys were a sit down family dynamic, because I think that when you talk about what you guys do, relationship build, communicate, and those type of things, it's festered from that, right? They're listening to you guys talk about your day, you're listening to them talk about their day, and we're all finding ways to make it make sense, right? We're talking to them on that level. It goes back to what we talk about business ownership, right? How do you get on their level by still having the high level communication that you need to have, right? Many of the listeners that we have are business owners or aspiring owners. It's just finding other ways to communicate, be authentic, all of those things. So, as we're talking to those business owners or aspiring business owners, how do you feel like they can apply your teachings on connection and build a loyal customer base and have a strong culture from day one?
It all comes down to going first and starting with the relationship with yourself and really sitting back and asking yourself, am I, because I believe those three triangle pieces we talked about, right? Visibility, vulnerability, and relatability. They apply to the relationship with yourself first, too. Are you actually showing up for yourself? That's what visibility is. Are you showing up for you first? Are you being vulnerable with yourself? Are you allowing yourself to think the thoughts and to have the fears and to be real about things about yourself? And then relatability, do you actually relate to yourself? Half the problem in the world is we don't like who we're walking around with. Something that I've recently discovered, and it's now, I'll give you, is hopefully none of you are coming to my keynotes in the next 3 months, but if you live until you are 85 years old, you will spend 44 million minutes with yourself. Think about that for a second. 44 million minutes. Imagine being stuck in an elevator for 44 million minutes with someone you don't like. Imagine being stuck in an elevator for 44 million minutes with someone who is toxic, talks awful to themselves, doesn't like who they are, doesn't like looking in the mirror. A mirrored elevator. Let's just call it a mirrored elevator. There's mirrors in elevators, right? At hotels and all kinds of stuff. So I say that because you got to work on you first. And then the second thing I would say is, I do this in my teachings, and for those of you that are part of this incredible company, you can go back and watch your webinar, but how do you build those real relationships with others? And I have a whole framework for it, but to give you kind of an overarching, we have to be authentically us, duh. We have to truly understand others. Think about that for a second. Do you really understand your team? We have to invest in them with intention, not just the weekly sales meeting, but how are you investing in your relationships with your team and with your clients? How are you leveraging moments? Because moments are happening every single day. Birthdays, anniversaries, they had a bad day, their kid won an award, their daughter is going in for heart surgery. Are you leveraging that moment? Do you even know what's happening? Are you sending flowers? Are you checking in on mom and dad? Are you doing a dinner train at the company? Like, what are you doing to actually take care of that moment? And then the last is deliver extraordinary value. Because at the end of the day, you can be the nicest human on the planet. If you're not good at what you do, all of this goes out the window. Forget everything I said about this podcast if you are not good at what you do, which I hope we all are, right? But how do you deliver extraordinary value that keeps people coming back over and over and over again? That's what we really want to develop. And guess what? People are going to come back over and over and over again if you are good at what you do and you built the relationship. I know we all live in this referral based industry. All of us in sales want referrals. Trust me, it's how I built my entire career. The problem is too many salespeople are taught to focus on the referral before the relationship. And you can't just focus on the referral. That's an action, that's an outcome of building the relationship. If you focus on building the relationship first and you deliver value, the referrals will come.
And to your point, just because you might not be the best at what you're doing right now does not mean you can't become the best at what you do.
Well, I would second, third, fourth, 10th that because I always say that my son's story is proof, right? That it's not always about experience, expertise, or knowledge. Because the kid had none of them, except for knowing baseball better than most agents do because he lived it and played it and actually played. Most agents have not actually played the professional level game. Most of them were high school or college and then they fell off. He actually lived it and breathed it. So he has a different relatability to players, which is one of his secret sauces. However, he doesn't know what he does now. He's been doing it now almost 4 years. He knows now. He didn't when he started. That is proof that you can be successful if you've built the right relationships.
Yeah, the thing that's I think about his career and I've followed him on social media and those type of things. And I think the thing that's the most important is his secret sauce can't be learned.
No.
He lived it. He's one of them.
No.
He's
Yes.
one of them. And
Yes.
so when you talk about the other aspects of things, even at his perspective, he says, "I might not know this, that, or the other, but I can learn that." They'll never know what it's like to ride a bus from Pocatello, Idaho to Missoula,
You really do understand minor league
right?
baseball. Yeah.
And so I was gonna this that kinda led me to this. I was gonna ask you this as our final question, but you kinda touched on it already. But, like, to wrap up, I'd like to give our listeners something they can take action on immediately, right?
Mhm.
You could leave the audience with one simple practice that they could implement today to be a more connected leader, what would it be?
Whether in leadership or sales, the number one thing is investing. Hands down, end of day, all day long. We talked about all the inner work, but that I can't give as many quick actions on that. But the outer work is, do you have a plan for truly investing in relationships? And I always simplify it. And I want you to take everyone, not everyone, take your top 100 people. If you're a sales team, if you're a leader, that's different. You probably don't have 100 people underneath you. But if you're a salesperson, you might have 100 clients. Take them, you rank them simply 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Just use your imagination what a five-star relationship would look like versus a one-star relationship. Rank them all. Just get a piece of paper or an Excel spreadsheet and just rank them all. Then I want you to take your five-star people, the most important people in your business that can move the needle the quickest and fastest in your business, and start investing in them. And do a simple action that I call the Make Some Wednesday mindset. I call it the 5 by 5 formula. 5 messages a day to 5 people you really care about. And these messages are nothing more than, "I was thinking about you. How are you? Dave, how's the girls? How was the vacation?" A simple message to show up thoughtfully in their life and start truly investing in the relationship, starting from the right people, the top people, and work your way down. And do that every day, and then develop more systems around it, which is what I teach in training and workshops, and watch how your business and your life change.
Powerful. Barb, I don't even know where to start, but thank you for your sharing your passion, your wisdom with us today. You've reminded us all that at the heart of every successful business, there's an authentic connection, and the leadership is always people first.
People first.
For our listeners, take Barb's advice, lean into your why, and never underestimate the power of building relationships. Until next time, keep pushing forward, keep connecting, and keep building your future. Barb, thank you so much.
Thank you, Dave.